The Archetypal Tarot Podcast explores universal human patterns, called archetypes, by investigating the major arcana of the ancient tarot. We recognize these archetypes because they are present in our own life stories, myths, and culture. Each card represents a stage of the journey for understanding the greater story of our lives.
Hello, Julienne here. Cyndera's busy exploring the Netherlands, but while she's away, I get to start the new year off with something really exciting. An all-new and improved Archetypal Tarot Podcast. We are going to be revisiting the Major Arcana again, but this time with special guests who are going to give their insights on the themes and ideas presented in these ancient yet totally relevant archetypal stories. And since it's the start of a brand new year, what better time to focus on the Fool and cultivating a life of passion and adventure? And we're incredibly excited to present this conversation with best-selling author Greg Lavoie, who has quite literally written the book on the nature and nurture of passion, where his first book, Callings, was about finding and following an authentic life. His new book, Vital Signs, picks up on the whys and hows of how we lose and how we regain passion for a life with creativity and abundance. I love this new book, and I really recommend that you get a copy. So you can just check out his website at greglavoie.com. And now my conversation with Greg about the Fool, zombies, vampires, wildness, intuition, how we can and should reignite passion in our lives. Hey Greg, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you today?
Yeah. I am really good, and I'm super excited that you're going to be on this podcast, especially it's the beginning of the year, it's a new year, just because it's a really rich time to talk about passion. So, and as I was thinking about it, I was like, Greg has a passion for passion. Does that ring true to you?
Oh, absolutely.
Share with us a little bit more about your book, Vital Signs. I know it sounded like you've mentioned it took like 10 years. 10 years in the making?
It did. A little bit more, actually. Yeah, I got spoiled by the book that preceded it, which was Callings, which took me 2 years alone in a room. But I guess every child is a little bit different. I've had this fascination pretty much my whole life. How is it that people create a life that really belongs to them and isn't a knockoff? And I think a big part of the similarity between the two books is that Callings was about finding a passion, and Vital Signs is more about living passionately. So I'm broadening the beam and looking at a lot of different arenas other than just the vocational. And it's really just about the process that we go through in attempting to regain or reclaim, rejuvenate our, goes by a lot of names, our spark, our passion, our mojo, our life force, our get up and go. So it's really about how we have it initially, of course, how we lose it, and how we get it back.
I think it's brilliant and completely timely. As I mentioned before, I'm a huge fan of Callings. It's one of those books that I've read cover to cover many times. And although I think Vital Signs, I've made it through once, but I can tell you I'm going to be dipping back into it just for myself, and just, it's incredibly rich. And there's that question of like, what do I do now? Great, I might have found my calling, or I was passionate about it, but by nature, I guess, passion will fade or erode, or things change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's unfortunately part of the reputation that precedes it, is that it's kind of an unstable element, and it's naturally going to kind of degrade as soon as you put it in the presence of familiarity or commitment or something like that. But the fact is, in that sense, nature is really no different than anything else. It's really in the nature of nature to fade. You know what I'm saying? Yes, exactly, precisely. The law of entropy pretty much tells us that any system is eventually, over time, going to lose energy unless you pump more energy into the system, or in this case, unless you pump more passion into the system. It is naturally going to fade in any arena, whether you're talking about a relationship or a career. And I think the way it goes is that a cup of coffee is going to cool down unless you reheat the thing. Oatmeal is going to congeal if you stop stirring it, as will marriages. And I think a lot of people
all relationships.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know this syndrome. How soulmates turn into stalemates, and it's because they don't continue to pump energy into the system, attention and gratitude and things like that.
Exactly, and there's still that's why this book is amazing, because you've gone into great depth into what passion is, and like you said, what can happen. But there's still this overriding like societal belief that passion is somehow just luck or it's magical, and that you just kind of, it gets sprinkled on you by a fairy godmother or something at some point. But your book really is talking about passion more as a skill set, something that you practice. I haven't seen anything else quite there like it. And because this is the Archetypal Tarot Podcast, and we in this podcast examine just sort of the various characters in the tarot as looking at them as mythology of who we are and how we experience life. So when, we were talking about getting together for this discussion, it also being the beginning of the year, the Fool character is the 0 card in many tarot decks, shall I say. And the Fool represents a lot of what you talk about in your book about being wild, taking risks. In a lot of cases, I think of the Fool as just anathema to overthinking. Like, the Fool does not think. The Fool falls off the cliff, has a direct relationship with like, oh, this just happened. What do I do now?
Yeah.
And
it's funny. I also think of the Fool as, the jester, the joker that's in every deck. And I think of it as kind of the surprise element that's just inherent in life. It's the unexpected, and I think at some level, despite the fact that we're sort of in a constant tug of war with ourselves around passion versus security or safety or comfort or all that, I think there is a part of us that's like the dog that's always scratching at the back door wanting out. Like there's a part of us that just wants to kind of run tire tracks across this nice, neat suburban lawn, this mindset of security and comfort. There's a part of us that just, what is that wonderful phrase from Sark? Tame is what we're taught, wild is what we are.
Oh, brilliant. And it's so true. And that actually the dog is depicted in many of the Fool cards.
Oh, that's right.
It is, and a lot of times I'm I think the very first podcast we did almost like 2.5 years ago, my colleague and I, Cyndera, discussed what the dog might represent. And often we can see it as that wild part of us that's just, it's nipping at the heels. And in the card, the most popular depiction of the Rider-Waite is the dog is right there literally at the Fool's heels going, yep, we're going over that cliff and I'm coming with you.
Yeah, you mean yip.
Yep, exactly. Or as I like to describe it, Wile E. Coyote falling off the cliff and going,
exactly.
Yikes! Like, what just
That's
happened?
half the reason I have always loved having dogs around. I grew up with them, and I've had them for good portions of my adult life. And part of what I love about having an animal in the house is that they always help to literally ground me. I can get, especially in a profession like mine, because I'm a writer, I can get very thinky and very up in my head, very abstract. And the dog is grounded, all 4 feet on Mother Earth, and their needs are so basic and so elemental. And I just feel like my brain is like a Rubik's cube compared to having a dog around. And it's great for me, and I think it's great for people to have a good first-person singular relationship with the animal kingdom, whatever form that can take.
It's true, and I agree. Just being around animals, and they're also, and dogs especially, they're a symbol of loyalty, and just they're passionate about throw the ball. They'll never let that go. They're passionate about food, and they're it's a great way for us to kind of connect and also remember that we're companions with the animal. You know, it's not just like I have a dog. The dog also has me. And that's that relationship.
Right.
And that's one of my favorite chapters. And I'm highly going to encourage everyone listening to get your book and dive into it. And I found that I can read it cover to cover as well as just dive into any one chapter, anything that sort of sparked my interest. And the one for me right now is you're talking about the call of the wild. And you really made me think about a lot of things that just have never occurred to me about because especially myself really feel very domesticated. I live in a big city. I pretty much spend all my time in the big city, even though daily I go out to the park or the woods or somewhere. But that all of the points you made about the complete necessity of honoring and nurturing a relationship with wildness, both as an archetype and experientially.
Right.
I love the depth that you go into for all of the major sections, the spark, the questing, just being free to express. But the call of the wild, and it hits me personally, but I also can kind of see it happening in the culture. Movies that are coming out in the last couple of years about, like the woman who walked the Pacific Crest Trail, by herself, and
right.
It's called wild, and it's relationship to getting back to that wildness, and it's not always pretty, it's not always comfortable.
Yeah, I think, boy, oh boy, it is fascinating. I'm delighted to see that there's more and more dialogue about this side of us. But I have run across this that some people actually define neurosis as the struggle, the split between two parts of us, and effectively what it comes down to is the socialized part of us and the natural part. The conditioned part and the natural part, and the tame side and the wild side, and I really get that. I've heard Freud talk about. Not literally heard him, but I've read him talk about the fact that civilization itself is the counterpunch to nature, and it was we pretty much designed it to separate us from the natural world, and some of the challenges of cold, dark, wet, hungry, that kind of thing. But it in some ways it's gotten way out of hand, and we, according to the EPA, we spend 90% of our times, this is Americans, indoors. And when we do go outside, our feet are very seldom on the actual ground. They're on sidewalks, they're on linoleum, they're on carpeting. We go for ages without feeling water pouring over our bodies that emanates from something other than a shower head. And, so we've really lost a lot in our, as it were, our coming of age, as a species. And everybody can relate to this being divided within ourselves. And I just think that it's really important to remember to what degree we are animals ourselves, to remember our place in the natural scheme of things. And it takes a few days of being away from the office and the city and all what you just described, for instance, for that to come back to us. There was a fellow that I interviewed after who used to take people into the wilderness as he was a college professor, and he was the guy who started ecopsychology. And he took people out there. It took them 4 days, he said, to start shedding all that cultural conditioning and start their natural selves again. And so he says, culture may be 20, 15,000 years old, but it's 4 days deep. How close to the surface this part of us is that feels at home sitting around a small circle of people around a fireplace and looking up into the night sky. That kind of thing.
Oh, Greg, I want to go camping right now. Like, I got to do that.
It's funny. To this day, I still carry around with me from house to house to house this disgusting, moldy old backpacking backpack. I mean, it's been 20 years since I've gone out into the wilderness in any way that I would need such a thing, but I can't let go of it because it represents a link to this part of me I'm not quite ready to let go of. Interesting.
It is, and I'm thinking about the 4 days, which at once seems like not a lot of time at all, like only 4 days to kind of peel back that layer, but at the same time, because we are animals, on 2 legs, it doesn't seem almost, like long enough to pull that away. But in my life, I found that to be true. It was a camp, just your basic city person's camping trip to the, drive up to the campsite kind of thing, car camping. But that, it doesn't take too long for that to sort of peel back. But there's that sense of safety is that, like, once we're done, we're going to pack up our tents and go back to our kind of safe, domesticated, environment.
Yeah.
But I see this reflected in the culture with, at least last year and the year before, there are a couple of themes that I thought might be fun to talk about you with. And one is like the idea of vampires and zombies, and the other this, all these shows, and these are kind of separate, but who knows, the scenarios where all technology's gone, we just post-apocalyptic, and the apocalypse really is technology going away and all of us kind of having to go back to living without electricity and our gadgets and all of that.
Right.
Or the zombie apocalypse. It's, our fear, of what would it be like, but also, to me, the underside of that is I think people would be a lot happier naturally getting back to this wild part of us, even though with these shows we're taken kicking and screaming into it.
Right. And I'm not of the either or school of thought on this kind of stuff. I just think we need to bring more of the wild energies, the creative energies, the passionate energies, the impulsiveness, just to bring it more back into the fold in our own individual lives, no less the culture.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an anarchist in that sense. I think there's a lot to be said for shaking ourselves up, for just little things like drive to work a slightly different route, get up on the other side of the bed in the morning, sit at a different side of the breakfast table for breakfast, rearrange like one piece of furniture in your house, sort of that approach to bringing more vitality and of the surprise element, the fool element into the picture, just ways to shake ourselves up just a little and not be quite so composed. But this thing about the vampires and the zombies amazes me. I actually Googled this at one point and found out that there have been over 50,000 books written about vampires and zombies just in the last 2 decades.
Wow.
And something like 500 movies and television shows. Now, that is a huge obsession. That is.
It is.
More than even fascination. That's us trying to work something out. Part of it, of course, is, you look at these 2 creatures. The vampire sucks the life force out of others. The zombie, is in a catatonic state in a sense.
It's the undead.
Yeah, exactly. The Walking Dead. And I think there's a part of us, like I think we mentioned when we chatted a couple of days ago, this movie Shaun of the Dead, where they show the workers at I guess it was like a typical little inner city grocery store or something. And these were not zombies, but they were making a point that day-to-day life for a lot of people looks like that, because here you are, having the life sucked out of you at a McJob. And they showed this row of cashiers just looking like zombies going through their paces. And I think there's a lot of people who can relate to everything from being at a job that sucks the life out of you, being in a relationship that, where you feel like a shadow of your full glorious self. I think a lot of people can relate to these kinds of scenarios. Being involved in activities or even jobs that are literally demeaning, that have no meaning or no purpose for you. And I think this, maybe overstating it to call it an epidemic, but when the Gallup polls 142 countries like they did in 2012, and they find out that 87% of workers are either not engaged or actively disengaged. That tells you partly, I think, why we're fascinated by vampires and zombies.
Absolutely. And I personally am not into or really get all that excited just because something's a vampire or a zombie, but being kind of in the archetypal realm for so long, it definitely seems like, what is going on? There's this, in both vampires and zombies, there's no cure. And a lot of the stories, that basically as it's bubbling up out of the culture, there's a vampire is always going to be a vampire. You can never not be a vampire unless you're killed, which is a stake in the heart.
Right.
Heavy symbology there. And there's no real cure for being a zombie. You just have to escape becoming one yourself.
Yeah.
And
although there was this one movie, I don't remember the name of it. It involved two young people. He was a zombie, she was not, and through his relationship with her, and I guess I haven't seen the movie, falling in love with her, he unzombified himself. So
good.
This one movie that love is also an antidote, not just being decapitated or something.
That's good. It's good to see sort of what we perceive as like this can't be changed, to have artists and people starting to present something. I was like, hey, well, maybe not. Maybe we don't all have to become zombies.
Right. Yeah. I think the World War Z was one of the first ones I ever saw. I think there was one or two before that, maybe 28 Days, that showed that zombies didn't have to be slow and sluggish, and they could be fast and wicked. And it's like, yeah, people are playing with the archetype and trying to, in that case, I sort of pump some vitality into the creature.
Absolutely. And I've been fascinated with the idea of the zombie apocalypse, and every once in a while I'll talk to somebody and they'll seems like they're talking about a real thing, and it kind of gets me a little bit worried. It's not really going to happen. Like the CDC put out a April Fool's thing about how to prepare for the zombie apocalypse, and to me it's like your book and the idea of passion and recognizing that passion isn't just this lucky thing that happens to you in your 20s or something that falls from the sky on you, that it can be looked at, in so many different ways and more of as a skill that, that to me is the antidote to the zombie apocalypse. Is it's all in our hands in very, very simple ways. There's a spectrum that you present in the book. Of, like you said, making tiny changes, like eat breakfast in a different part of your house, just do something different. And that's all backed up with, neuroscience, basically. The brain loves novelty. And when we get tired of something, we got to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I ran across a book called New by Winifred Gallagher. And I mean, her whole thing is what she calls neophilia. And it's the passion for novelty, like you said. And that she cites studies that find that when they look for the traits that characterize people who flourish over the years, one of the traits that most of them have in common is a love of novelty or an interest in novelty. And I just think that's, really the Buddhists have been talking about this forever. It's called beginner's mind. Educators talk about being a lifelong learner. It's, and this is in the survival mechanism category to me, because I think you're much more likely to have a long term if you take an interest in life. That our attachment to life depends on our interest in it to a great degree. And I think neophilia is critical, is cultivate an interest in the world again. When you walk into big lobbies, grand atriums, look up, just carry a magnifying glass with you when you wander around the world, because there's a whole universe of the tiny out there that is just radically amazing, and ways to reframe the world just by looking through a magnifying glass. Have the astronomy picture of the day link on the what do they call them, the bookmarks on your, ways to re-engage and remember that the world is amazing. That's why I have this page on my website called the Wow page. And
I love that page.
Oh, I do too. It's just pictures of amazing things. And it's as simple as that, is to remember that the world is shot through with amazement and surprise and wonderful, delicious foolishness. And we can partake of it anytime we want to turn that receiver on and be beginner again.
We hope you're enjoying this episode, and we invite you to become a part of the Archetypal Tarot team by becoming a patron. It's super easy, and there are some awesome rewards for joining. So just visit tiny.cc/tarot for more information. And now back to our program.
And it, and I get it. This is a high art, because people love expertise and mastery, and I've earned my 10,000 hours according to Malcolm Gladwell, and now I'm a master. And and the idea of being a rookie again is a stinker in almost any category. But it's where the growth and the development is. I saw a book cover a couple of days ago that said, "Great leaders ask great questions." I don't know anything more about the book, but when I saw the cover, I just intuitively knew that was right. And it's really the same skill that children have. Newsweek magazine said they ask 100 questions a day on average, little ones. That would drive most parents to drink. and unfortunately for the children, that shuts down pretty quickly in life. And for the grown-ups.
Yeah. So hang around with a dog. Hang around a 4-year-old, because 3 is great too, but 4, they're putting stuff together, and so they ask even more annoying questions. But my role as an auntie, I get the benefit of kind of taking the pressure off the parents, being like, "Oh, bring over the auntie," because I have a lot of fun answering questions, and a lot of time just making stuff up and seeing if they can kind of call me on my BS, and that's a really great creative way to play out their creativity. It's like, why is the sky blue? And I just make up something completely ridiculous, like they're blueberries or whatever. And you just watch, I watch my niece just kind of look at me like, no, that's totally not true. And I'm like, you're right, it's not true.
That's great. That sort of reminds me of that game my dad used to play with me and my 2 brothers. Sort of a version of that, except we had to tell the truth. He called it the alien game. And he was an alien. We were the earthlings. We'd go out into the neighborhood, and he would ask questions like you just said, like, why is the sky blue? Or, what are the white formations that move through your atmosphere and stuff like that. And we had to try to explain planet Earth to him, and it was an incredible teaching tool.
Oh, my God.
And, the single greatest gift he ever gave me was that sense of questions equals discovery. And discovery is half of where passion is.
I love that. That's that's a perfect way to kind of learn and teach at the same time. I'm wondering, anybody in their job, if they spent, as long as you're not some big stuffy corporate thing, or maybe you could do it anyway, is have, we did something similar in kind of corporate level years ago, but we would have one department try to explain what the other department did in kind of in reverse. And then ask them, okay, now you have to do it. I mean, I wanted to do interpretive dance, but nobody would go for that. So we had to basically do like without words, explain a certain part. And this is technology, networking, and all of that. So, getting that into your workplace to do something creative and different, get up and explain, why a fiber optic cable is better than, regular cable. And the guys on that team came up with this brilliant, hilarious way of explaining and lining everybody up and basically doing an interpretation of what it would look like going through fiber optic versus a regular cable. And it was hilarious. You know what? Everybody in that room remembered what it was.
I suspect this is why my older brother just decided to retire from Stanford and go to work for Google. Two very different cultures. What you're describing sounds like a place like Google, where people are encouraged to be creative, and the place itself is just wild looking, and the food is free, and But he decided to retire from Stanford because he said he went and worked for Google on the Google Glass project for about 2 years as a leave of absence from the university, temporary leave. And he fell in love with the place. He was having more fun, he said, and enjoying fresh challenge. And he decided to, and who retires from a tenured professorship at a place like Stanford?
Right.
And the fact that he did it because he wanted more fun in his life, strikes me as pretty amazing validation for how important that little precious commodity is. But he's going from a culture where tenureship is the top of the heap, and he actually said this to me. One of the primary motivations for him leaving was a newspaper clip I had sent him way back when he started the university in, I guess it was maybe the late 80s, early 90s, and it said, how fossils are formed. Step 1, get tenure. Step 2, teach for 20 years. I know. And he said, I had that thing on the center of my bulletin board for the last 19 years. And I swore that would never happen to me. And by the time he leaves Stanford, it's going to have been tenure plus 20 years. And,
wow.
To go from a culture that's very, tenure oriented, a lot of people are concerned that it tends to clamp its teeth down on people's creativity and make them lazy and whatnot. And to go to a place like Google, which is like throwing the deck of cards up in the air, I can see why he did it, though.
Absolutely. I mean, and to realize that, I don't want to be that fossil, or maybe I am that fossil right now.
Right.
And that the opportunity came up, and kind of, it takes some bravery to make that leap.
No doubt about it. This is one of the reasons I always encourage people to start small. Start small, trying to, work more vitality into your life, or taking risks, or, bundling more novelty into your life. You don't have to turn your life upside down. I think the real key and the real heart of the discernment process is take a step and then look at the feedback your life gives you. Okay? You take a step towards something you're fascinated by, or something that's new for you, or something that's a little bit of a risk. Maybe you take your jokes out to open mic night. Maybe you're the first one to make up after a quarrel. Little, small stuff. And then you look at the feedback that your own life gives to you. Do you feel better or worse? Do you feel more awake or more asleep? You take a step and you look at the feedback. And I just think that's really where, if nothing else, what you give yourself by taking that small steps approach is the experience of momentum early in the game, so that all the goodies and all the goals aren't long term, and all the problems and all the obstacles are short term. And I think the experience of progress, of movement, is much more likely to keep you going. And I certainly don't believe in hurling your body against the wall, like just up and quit your job immediately, unless it's absolutely toxic. It's just take experiments with some new things, some places where you feel some life force, and just see how it looks. Or for that matter, cut out some of the parts of your life where you're just draining. The energy is draining out of you, and stop doing it and see what happens.
I think what you're talking about, that relationship between safety and risk and excitement, and that you don't always have to. To me, you can basically fall into a situation where everything changes and it wasn't your choice. That was like by accident, or something changed in your family or your job, or whatever happens, and you're thrown into it. There's a huge amount of energy that goes with that, I think, if you don't resist it. But for most people, your day-to-day life, you have always dreamed of doing one thing or another, or maybe you are living your dream, but it's kind of starting to drain, and you start questioning whether you should continue to do it. That ability to make those smaller steps, to make those decisions, call a friend, do whatever, run something by somebody else, do a bunch of Google searches about it, and take some action that is in relationship to the outside world. And that's something I see for myself, because I do a lot of stuff in my head first, but I actually have to ping the outside world either by a phone call or some communication or something that actually happens outside my brain. And then really seeing that, how does it come back to me? You know, like, I love that the dictum of what happens can be your answer. You know, I sent that out and see what happens.
Right. Yeah, I know. I consulted with a guy last year who said that he was waiting for what he called absolute clarity before he would act on a particular passion that he had identified. And I suggested that perhaps the clarity he seemed absolutely intent on finding, he may only find by taking action.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like I ran across an improvisational theater teacher named Nina Weiss, and she said the spontaneous action is really critical. Not just the well-planned, well thought out, but she says the equation is ready, fire, aim. And I love that. I think there's so much to that, and especially for somebody like myself, I tend to be a planner. My default position is planning, and she says spontaneous is so important. To just allow yourself to be moved toward, what do you really feel like doing in this moment? Who do you really feel like being with in this moment? What do you really feel like saying to this person in this situation? What am I most curious about right in this moment? You know what I'm saying? And allowing yourself to be spontaneous. Again, it could be a high art.
It is. And I don't know, I question the belief that you're ever absolutely certain. You know, I think there are times when our intuition is pinging us and saying, ding, 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 you're ready to go, you're ready to go, you're ready to go. But the strategic brain, we put in charge. Like, that's the number, like, that's because the world supports that, especially sort of the Western culture of work ethic and all of that, is the strategic mind is there. But often that fights with the artistic part of my brain that's just like, strategy, schmategy, like, just go. This is dying here. But the only times I felt really, really sure about something, they were not strategic. It wasn't related to a plan. It was an intuitive sense that's like, yep, this is the right thing to do.
Right, exactly.
And
I think
you do it.
Practicing the intuitive arts on a regular basis, it's just a muscle that you can train. Like you said, it's a skill that you can build. But I think that over time, by acting on little intuitions, what do I really want to order at the restaurant? Which book do I really want to pick up off the shelf? Who do I really feel like spending time with? That by doing that over the course of time, it's almost like instinct and reason become kind of indistinguishable. That you just act. When you act with spontaneity, you're actually acting with great authority because it's practiced. And you can begin to trust your intuitions and trust your impulses because it's a well-used muscle, and you know that there's some deep truth in there. But I think that only comes by being willing to practice it with some regularity.
Yeah, you can't do it any other way. That's therein lies the rub. You can't mess with intuition. You're either working on it or you're not. I think in small ways, trusting a little, like, I'm going to turn left here and maybe there'll be a parking space. There are less risky ways, but there's no way to really strengthen that muscle and work with intuition unless you actually follow it. But intuition in those low risk situations, like trying to find a parking space or finding something in a store or what have you, are good ways to work with that.
Right, exactly. A friend used to tell me to cover the captions on cartoons and try to guess what the caption is by looking at the cartoon itself.
Oh, that's fun. That's creative.
Yeah.
You might come up with something even better. So I love this conversation. I think it's just the perfect time to be talking about it, to carry that energy and know that, like, you've written this entire wonderful book that is deeply researched and also has your own personal narrative as a creative person running through it, that, there isn't anything out there quite like it and presents things with I think, really, really keen insight into it. And I can't wait to see what other people think of it. And I'm certainly going to be using it for myself, and have already. I mean, there's, I did just like calling. The only time I've ever really completely filled in the very blank page at the very back with my notes and page number this, page number that, go back to that. And I think you should be very proud of yourself, sir. I love it.
Thank you. I thank you so much. That's just music to my ears, because ultimately I just wanted to speak to people. I want people to recognize themselves in it. I want to make it real life 101, not abstract, not intellectual and academic, not certainly not the 5 easy steps, but to really tell it like it is. What is it really like to lose and try to regain a sense of passion for your own life, excitement for waking up in the morning, beginner's mind. I mean, all these things, I just want to make it relatable to.
I think you have. And like I mentioned earlier, the beauty of the book, not only does it have a narrative running through it, but it's just going to the front to the contents. And I think if people just intuitively looked over, the sections that you've got there, and just bounced right into that, they could get a lot from it. And we unfortunately live in this, everyone wants the bullet points with 5 easy steps. And passion is definitely, I think, you can't really, you could probably have something that would work pretty okay. But I think for most of us, we've reached a point in our lives where that bullet point, that's kind of nice, the 5 steps, but it's not going to hit home.
Where's my passion app?
Yeah, exactly. You could wash a bunch of great stuff out of it, but what you end up with is just something of 5 generic lists. This, I think, what is really kind of meaty about it is dip into any one of these that calls to you, and you're going to get something out of it that's not just a cut and dried, they call it a listicle. It's a blog post is just a list. I'm done with lists. There's a million of them out there.
So I'll rise to the challenge. I'll give you or your listeners, I'll give you a list of 5 things. Okay. This is really in the absurd category, but here's a list of like five things you could do to beef up the quality of passion and vitality and life force in your life. So number 1 is pay attention to what is trying to emerge in your life, to what is trying to happen. Just step back from busyness as usual and listen to what's in there. That's number 1. Number 2, remember that you have a use by date. Let the fact of your personal mortality sink in, really sink in your face, sink in, and inspire you to action. Number 3, come up with a bucket list. There's a artist named Candy Chang who started something called the Before I Die, I Want to ... And there are 700 cities around the world that now have these great big walls outdoors that have Before I Die, I Want to, and the public fills them out, and I mean really fills them out. It's incredible. So it's all about a bucket list. 4, always give yourself something to look forward to. The word adventure comes from a word meaning something about to happen. And Advent, Advent referring to the coming of Christ. So a spirit of adventure in life is one where you're always giving yourself something to look forward to. And finally, let's see, I would say look for where you're restless. Look for where restlessness, makes itself known in your life. And I'm going to borrow this from a psychologist named Arnold Mindell. Started something called process-oriented psychology. He says, look at where there's restlessness and ask the question, what wants to move and where does it want to go? I love that. I mean, he says, look at the word restless all by itself. Rest less. So there's my list of 5.
Your 5. Those are all really big too. They're amazing.
But that's kind of my point,
Exactly.
It's 5 things, but each one of them is a lifetime's worth of work, really.
They really are. Yeah. What is your life telling you? I've definitely something I've keyed into and have a couple articles of like understanding the seasons, like what season are you in? What are you being called to do? To rest, to plant, to harvest? Like, where are you with that? And that for me at that time was a really great way to frame it, because what is my life telling you can be a little overwhelming, because the strategic mind's like, I got to analyze this, and you end up with this kind of crazy scenario in your head. And what is your life telling you? And is there anything, one little specific thing that's popping up, so you don't get lost in the, it's too much, just to have enough sort of Velcro to like pull onto something like that. But those are rich questions, and I think perfect for this time of year. And a lot of what I got from reading your book, and I also experienced in my own life, is the sense of play. Really allow yourself to play, and the richness that can come from that. And we play with dogs, we play with children. There are great teachers, I think, all around us, just kind of waiting for us to wake up.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Be pulled
and
into
play is like
play.
Also play with the hard stuff too. Not just go out and play ball or play with your dog, or it's like bring a playful, improvisational attitude toward the hard stuff, the challenges, the over-reliance on security and comfort to the point that you're stagnating and breeding mosquitoes, or bring playfulness to the shadow, to the fear of moving forward. Again, I'm thinking of, I think it was Nina Weiss who held it was a party in celebration of depression. And she had everybody come, everybody had to wear black, everybody had to bring black food. There was black napkins and black plates and black caviar and black olives. And whenever somebody asked how you were, you had to say terrible, miserable, awful, and recite a litany of all your complaints. And they did this for like 2 hours, and then they stopped and danced. I just think that's brilliant.
It is brilliant. And it's really just I'm circling back to the fool character, the trickster, or the coyote character, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the archetype of the trickster fool has existed, since we were able to like write stuff down. And that party that she threw was exactly it. It's turning everything on its head. It's almost like going through to find the absurd within something that is deeply serious, depression, like, wow, there's nothing funny about that. But turning all of it on its head and working with it in that way, incredibly powerful, and not something most people would think of. So that, I'm going to add number 6 on here, turn something upside down, turn it inside out. And, relationships huge. When you're in a romantic relationship with somebody, sometimes humor is the only way to deal with it. And the couples that I know that I just really, really admire, they have regular doses of humor in their life.
To apply humor to the fights, my ex-wife and I did this once. She and I were fighting, and so what we did is we sat in the living room. In our living room, this was in the Southwest, so it was all tile. All right, that's important for later in the story. So we sit on the floor with our backs facing each other. So we're back to back. We're facing out into the room, away from each other, and for about a minute, what we just did is we yelled our frustrations just out into the air at each other. I mean, it was toward each other, but not facing one another. And so for 1 minute, we just purged, and then we turned around and we each had a bucket filled with water. We turned around and poured them over each other's heads. It is impossible to stay in fighting mode when you do something like that. And we got to scream it out, but not at the other guy's face.
Yeah.
And it was just play with the energy and don't take it so seriously. And I mean, the fact of the matter is she is still my ex-wife. It isn't necessarily a cure-all, but it's just a way to turn it upside down, like you said.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that story. And then what a great, you could do that in a relationship or with a friend. I mean, if people are willing to kind of go there, and that's kind of what it is, right? It's like both people taking, having the willingness. And part of that is just remembering the value of the absurd and turning things upside down, or recognizing that, I don't know what else to do. I'm in such pain. I'll try anything.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes life kind of gets like that, where it's like, I've tried this, might as well, right?
Yeah. And yet that's also I think that's part of coming back to life, is you get to a point of being desperate. And I think desperation in some ways, it's a marvelous place to be.
Yeah.
You've hit bottom. There's only up from there. And I just think that there's something, it feels terrible when you're in it. I understand. And I've been there. But something about the depression, suppression, repression thing, they all mean the same thing. You're pushing something down. And at some point, the soul just rebels. And you're depressed and you're bored and you're restless and you're lost. But that's act one of a 2-act play. And the second part is liberation and resurrection and some healing, and whatever's on the flip side of depression is expression.
Yeah, and I think too, and during this couple of years that we've done this podcast, and just using the tarot, the major arcana, and those situations and characters because it really is quite brilliant. It's mythology, not only as a model of the hero's journey, but things like what you were just talking about, in tarot, people would talk about the tower, where everything is just, that's it. It's all broken down. And that is, sure, it's sucky. It's horrible to be in it, but it is a necessary part of our life existence, either in big or small ways. You can have one day that everything got torn down and then you start building again. But to me, the danger is where you fall into dispassion because you're just treading water. The hanged man is staying hung upside down and never actually does anything. It's deadening. You're completely under the water at that point. But those moments, you have the breakdown in order to have the breakthrough, really looking at the broad spectrum of everything we go through in our life is necessary.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not uncomfortable, but it's
I think
important.
That's why the tarot is, those kind of modalities are so powerful. The archetypal realm, the hero's journey, that's such powerful stuff.
And we're continually drawn to it because I think we recognize that's who we are, and not only do you get the sense that, like, this is happening to other people, so there's a kinship built into that, the different stages that we go through, but to recognize that, you get a little bit of, like, it's okay. This is, like I was saying, like the tower, which is just the kind of destruction of something, the end of something. But it is an important part of the whole picture. It goes against, I think, this Western ideal of everything needs to be really pretty all of the time and work out really well and have an end goal. But life is messy, but it also has these touchstone points that we share with each other, and that we've, as a humanity, has been continually sharing.
Right, exactly.
And that, I think,
too, that even in the midst of the darkness or the depression or the all the anxiety and the fear, that there is still every bit as much beauty in the world as there was before you felt that way.
Yeah.
It's still there and can still be appreciated, maybe even more so. I just think that's part of living passionately as well, is living it out, all of it, fully, feeling everything. Gene Houston says that people who are bigger than life are not necessarily people who are living on big grand stages and they know influential people and they've got fame and fortune, but people who are deeply plugged in, who what does she say? Burning on more burners, firing on more burners. They feel their emotions, all of them, the whole spectrum of them, fully, and that's what she calls people who are bigger than life, is people who are feel things deeply and truly and don't try to make end runs around any of it, whether it's the joyous or the jarring.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of the song and I'm thinking of your website, because and I've learned from Jean before too, and talk about being in a room with somebody who lives big and feels big and is there. Huge amounts, just energetically being in the same room with Jean has been a blessing and amazement and inspiration. There's a song, and because your website, you've listed, so GregLavoie.com, GREGG, Lavoie.com. You have all these resources for everyone to look at passion. There's songs about passion. There's other books, resources, movies, and I'm going to suggest one for yours. There's a song by a woman named Feist.
Oh, I've heard
and
that.
that's just, she's fantastic. She's an amazing singer-songwriter. And there's a song called I Feel It All.
I Feel It All. Oh, that's marvelous.
Yeah, that one's been coming up on shuffle for me a lot lately. But
Okay.
that's a good one. That's a good one to add, because kind of like you're saying, you and I are not the only ones who've dealt with, creativity and finding passion and calling. Everybody listening to this has gone through, the ups and downs, and how do I bridge this gap or get out of this doldrum or whatever it is. I want to point, there's a community here. We all go through this. And with that, there's these resources like your WOW page on your website. There's songs that we can listen to, little tiny changes that we can make, and other resources. So I think for me, 2015, kind of feeling more about community and sharing all this stuff out even more. If people are interested, go to your website and suggest some other books and WOW pictures and all of that. And
I would love
continue
that.
to make it alive.
That would be
Because
great.
3 months from now, we're going to want to kick this one down the road a little bit farther. We've got our January energy, but
Right, exactly.
It's going to happen.
Yeah,
Right around the Ides of March, we're going to be like, all right, I live passionately. What do I do now?
Right.
So, thank you so much for building that resource. And I will continue to send stuff as it comes along, because it's got my imagination fired up and
Wonderful.
keenly listening in. Is there anything else or anything exciting that you're going to be doing, some teaching gigs or anything you want to tell the...
Yeah, I hit the road on Saturday for about 4 months of book touring. I've got speaking engagements all over the country, and it's all on the website.
Okay.
But I'm going to be a busy boy in the next few months. But, this is, any author can appreciate this. This is the window. So I decided to jump through the hoop and really got probably 30 speaking engagements over the next few months.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, good. You're absolutely a joy to speak with, and I'm super excited and honored that you're showing up for our humble little podcast here. We have a lot of listeners, though, and I think they're really going to enjoy this. And hurrah, excellent. So by April, May, I'm going to send you another email, see how things are going, and we'll definitely have people visit your website and buy this book, for crying out loud. Seriously. I'm not kidding. Like, anybody who's got a pulse, that's the way I wrote a review on it. It's everybody at one point in their life, and for people like me, weekly, need better ways and inspiration to, find passion, follow passion, and live while I'm living. That's kind of the big goal,
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and I thank you for just your good works in the world.
Oh, thank you.
You're one of the soul tenders.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Greg.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to become a part of the Archetypal Tarot team by becoming one of our patrons. Our patrons are awesome. So if you're interested, visit tiny.cc/tarot for more information and the awesome rewards for joining. That's tiny.cc/tarot. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. More information on Greg can be found at his website, greglavoy.com. That's GREGGLEVOY.com. And the complete show notes can be found at archetypus.com/passion. Our theme song was provided by Apollo Wildcat, and this is a production of Both and Media. Did you enjoy the show? We would love it if you wrote us a review or gave us a rating on iTunes, Stitcher, or even tell your friends about it. That's all kinds of awesome. Thanks so much. Until next time.